You know how much I love having conversations with marketing, so today I had to bring in Richard Bliss, where we're talking about branding, marketing for business, and we also spent some time talking about LinkedIn. His approach to LinkedIn has changed the way that I'm using LinkedIn right now, and I know that you'll want to hear his advice and information. But stay tuned, because we have a Pick My Brain question today, and I also am sharing with you a few of my favorite things, one of which got my cameraman to kind of raise his eyebrows, like, what are we talking about, right here on Make It Happen. Stay tuned. Welcome to today's Pick My Brain. In the spirit of marketing, we're going to talk a little bit about our organic search. If you have a question you'd like to send in to a future Pick My Brain segment, you can send it to michelle@speakmichelle.com, or you can find me on Instagram or your favorite social media platform and send me a direct message. And I would love to answer that for you. This message came to me via email from Lori Kirk-Rowley, who is from Plano, Texas. And she says, what are the best ways to drive organic traffic to a website? So not paid search. Okay, so this is a great question, and we can have all kinds of conversations about search engine optimization. But again, this is just Pick My Brain and not the whole episode. So I want to share with you a few quick things that you can do to get traffic to your website. The first is to utilize social media. Be careful, because we even talked about this in the episode today with Richard Bliss about how links do not work in social platforms. They don't want to send people off of the platform. And as we talk about home court advantage, they're trying to keep people there as much as possible. That said, you can generate interest in the content that you have. And I still have my social media platforms generating the majority of the traffic to my website. And I do that in a couple of different ways. I put links in posts from time to time. I always have the link in profile on Instagram. I do share the links, but I also will wait till people ask a question, and then I will drop the link in the comment. P.S. If you're wondering, that whole first link and comment business, especially on Facebook, is actually totally dead. Facebook has figured that out. If you have a link that you want to put in and you want it to work and you don't want it to lower your post in the algorithm, you can do one of two things. First, on Facebook, post a piece of content that will work really well for your audience. That could be a reel in this day and age, or it could be a Facebook Live. And then in the second post that you do, 12 to 24 hours later, talk about something on your website because of all the traffic and interest that you've generated with that piece of content that Facebook loves. Then you'll probably get by with a link a little bit better. But even better than that, I suggest that you wait until someone asks a question. From time to time, I ask a friend to ask a question so I can drop the link. Totally fine, but then you can put that in there for your traffic. But everything else is search engine optimization, because you're going to have to play a lot of link games in social media. So if you want to get organic traffic to your website, you need to be creating content-rich blog posts on a regular basis. In fact, studies have been done by HubSpot that if you are blogging once a week, you'll probably come up in search engines over time as those search engines have crawled your website, they've categorized you, they've figured out where you are. But you are 10 times more likely to show up in search results if you blog more than once a week. And so it goes dramatically up if you're blogging at least once or twice a week. Now, some people are like, Michelle, I feel like blogging is dead, but search engine optimization is still alive and well. Search engines are still crawling content and information. The problem is that if you've played in the game before and you've given up, then it probably hasn't worked for you the way that you've wanted. You've got to be consistent in your content on a regular basis. There have been some clients that I've worked with that they're like, Michelle, this is a really long game. And it is, because you can't just expect search engine results to happen overnight. But if you're consistent for a couple of years, you'll actually find that you show up in a lot of results. You'll also get a lot of details about what your market is actually watching and listening to, and which pieces of content are doing the best. I know which kinds of content work the best for my website. So now I'm a lot better at creating content like that so that I get better results and that I'm showing up more frequently in those platforms. If you're looking for organic, it's going to take a lot of effort. If you're looking for paid, then it's really easy to go and get in front of the search engine results that you need. But it's effort consistently over time, both in social media and on your own website, that will get you the kind of traffic that you desire. I'm cheering you on and wishing you the best. If you have more questions about SEO, feel free to send them our way. We'd be happy to do an SEO show in the future. But until then, we wish you all the best in growing and building your business. And thanks for sending in that question, Lori, to Pick My Brain. I am excited for today's interview with Richard Bliss, who I first saw speak in February of 2022 and then saw him speak a second time in April of 2022. I think it was April, but within a few months of each other. And I learned new things each time. I knew I wanted to have him on Make It Happen when I saw him the first time, but he is a former marketing executive and now is a business consultant in Silicon Valley. He's a Renaissance man of many talents, including an avid interest in board games, and also is the father of 5 children. Richard, welcome to Make It Happen.
Thank you, Michelle, for having me. What a pleasure.
I am so excited for today's conversation. I'd love for you to share a little bit with our audience about how you first knew that you loved marketing and all things business and branding.
I went to work for, it's very clear. I went to work for a company back in the mid 90s. I had started at WordPerfect Corporation, which a lot of people in Utah are going to know if they're based there. And then what happened is that a group of friends decided to start a company that I joined. And we're all techie guys. And somebody said, well, who's going to do marketing? And they said, Richard owns a tie. Let's have him do marketing. And so that was many years ago that started off. And I've had the opportunity of working in the marketing area and field as a marketing executive for many years, for a couple of decades, actually. And so it was just one of those things that I was drawn to and had a natural affinity for and quite enjoyed.
Is that part of your education background at all?
I have I majored in history and military science, so no.
Yes. See, I love that. People say to me all the time, well, Michelle, I didn't get my degree in marketing. And I thought, you know what, you can learn everything that you need to know by playing with it, doing it, and maybe doing a little bit of research. So I love
Absolutely.
that just became an interest and kind of an accidental step for you as well. I feel like that was an accidental step for me. I know that you do some great consulting. We're probably going to go a couple of different areas for businesses on branding and LinkedIn. Of course, I learned a lot from you on the LinkedIn side, so we'll talk a little bit about that today. But for those who are watching and listening and are thinking a lot about growing and building their business in this day and age, what tips and thoughts and ideas do you have about how marketing has shifted that they should be keeping in mind as they look towards the future?
Great question. I just got off a call with a very good friend of mine, Mark Schaefer, who has written a series of books out there that a lot of people have read about marketing. And the one thing, this was the topic. And one of the biggest challenges is that we have moved away from advertising. We have moved away. Advertising has dropped off so much, right? I don't know about you, but I don't watch advertising. And children today, you're hearing these anecdotal stories when they're watching live television and a commercial comes on. I've heard that kids walk up and they try to swipe the TV screen, right? They're like, why do we have to watch the commercial? Well, because their parents are watching a live event, a sporting event or something like that. And so this has dramatically changed. In addition, we used to go out. Advertising's design is to drive people from wherever they are to wherever our content is, and to build our brand that way by driving them. That's all changed, particularly since March of 2020, where the whole world flipped upside down. You now need to take your content and put it in front of an audience, wherever they happen to be. And that's one of the biggest challenges, is that where they happen to be are in a variety of different places. Social media being a key element of that, because we've had such a limited amount of in-person activities. How do I find those people and get my content? And I see, and this is what you learn from listening to me speak, putting links and driving people to websites and content is, people don't do that anymore. They only have a few minutes. They're right there. They're doing it. Give them what they want right there. And that's the biggest challenge. And then the one that Mark brought up was experience. People can't, it's not about putting your ad up there and differentiating yourself with an ad. It's about the experience of that interaction they're having with you and your brand. And that's really the biggest change.
Yeah, interesting. And it's interesting to see, like, every now and again, I get excited and I watch the commercials, which is because I'm a marketing girl and I love it. But it's true, because my kids are like, what's this? And they're bothered because they grew up in a Netflix generation and didn't have to look at those commercials. And yet at the same time, it's still interesting to me to see how businesses are trying to do just that. They're trying to create an experience. And in some ways, even if they just have 30 seconds to do it, how they try to accomplish that task. And I think about Super Bowl and how Coinbase just had a QR code going up and down a screen for 30 seconds. It cost them millions of dollars to show one thing. And yet at the same time, it was an experience. And if you wanted to play, you could play along. And so it's interesting to watch.
Did you hold up your phone and stand that QR?
I did not. Did you?
I did. Oh, of course. It's like, all right. This is pretty interesting. Let's find out what this is. Let's go share that experience. Well, yes, you bring up a very valid point. That experience can be done in a variety of ways because nobody knew what that was unless you knew what that was. There's a whole generation of people watching that game who had no idea what that was on their screen. And Coinbase is saying, good, we didn't want to talk to you anyway.
For sure. We just want to talk to the ones who know a little bit about us and are ready to take the next step.
Yep. And that next step was stepping up to pulling out your phone, holding up your camera and saying, let me participate here. So community is part of that experience, and people finding ways to build those communities is also critical.
Well, and I think this is an interesting conversation. We didn't talk about going here, so you're welcome to say I decline and pass on this question. But I feel like the marketing and tech world is changing ever rapidly. I mean, you go from, I grew up in the print and media age of marketing, and I watched social media come and grow and move into the digital age. And now we're moving into Web 3.0, which is totally different. We've got NFTs, we've got all kinds of crypto happening, we've got business happening in a virtual world in ways that I never ever saw coming, and yet they're totally here. As you think about some of those new things that are happening in the business space, what are your recommendations for people in playing in that if you're a small business?
If you're a small business, the thing I recommend is go play. You can't learn by reading, and you can't learn by sitting on the sidelines. And so you've got to go figure out a way to participate. And so there's a couple of ways that I have been doing that. I just bought my first NFT about 2 weeks ago. I was at a consumer expo conference in Phoenix, Arizona, for basically the creation of NFTs and that type of thing. Now, do I still understand it? No, but I bought one. And I knew the person and it was helping them out. I'm also participating in something called social coins, which is a new concept. And you're seeing that come from rally.io, which I'm been actively involved with, as well as I think Solana. And these are the idea that you can own a coin. It's not quite crypto, but it's kind of like crypto. And then that coin gives you access to content and community and all kinds of things. And so my advice is just go out and start playing around. If you're a small business, expect that you're not going to be able to figure out how to do it here in the short term. But in the long term, if you start playing, because here's a secret that I learned a long time ago, and it relates to board games. Back in there, when I had to teach myself social media, I had no idea what I was doing. So rather than use my business to experiment, I went and found a community that I could go play in. And I discovered that there's a very active board game community that I could teach myself podcasting, which ran for 10 years, made my own book, got myself involved with the community, shows, speaking engagements, all of that, all in a safe environment. So the time came for me to become a marketing consultant to tech leaders. I already had learned it in a place that didn't impact my brand. So my advice to those small businesses is go find ways to play right now when nobody quite is paying attention, and you can screw up and it won't have catastrophic impact on your business.
I think that's incredible advice. I went to Social Media Marketing World this year in the spring, and it was all about NFTs and crypto. And sure, we talked about LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. I mean, no one talks about Twitter anymore, much to my chagrin. But as I had the thought as I was sitting there, I have two choices. Like, this is coming whether I like it or not. Yep. I can either figure it out and be ahead of the curve, or I can wait until everyone else knows about it. And it's not going to be too late, right? It's not going to be too late, but I will have missed opportunities because I was too scared to dive in. And so as I've been diving in the last few months, I've been to some scary places in my mind and in the world, but I'm also learning things that I'm happy to be learning about, because I've got my kid's friend is selling NFTs and making 10 grand a night, and is knowing and doing things I know my kids will be knowing and doing things that I don't even have a concept of. And so I've got to figure some of that out. Anyway, we digress.
No, that's right. I was going to say, I always taught my children as they're all grown now. I taught them, I said, look, the job you're going to have, the career you're going to have doesn't exist. So you're going to have to create it. And that's true for today's kids who are growing up. The future does not exist in the careers that they want to pursue. And so they're going to have to go make them.
Yep, absolutely. I want to touch a little bit on branding, and then I want to dive into LinkedIn, which is a place we've been playing a lot more as a result of listening to you speak a little bit. But as you think about branding in this day and age, do you feel like there are any differences now than there were a little bit ago? I mean, you speak to changes in advertising and marketing. What should a small business owner, or marketer, or even professional be aware of in the branding space?
In the branding space, it has always been about consistency. Branding and advertising oftentimes are confused. Advertising falls under branding, but branding doesn't necessarily fall under advertising. And so finding ways to determine, some people say start with the why, right? The Simon Sinek, but it's really start with the who are you? And then how do you communicate that unique experience to your customers and your prospects? Is there something unique about doing business with you? Is there something unique that sets you apart? And it doesn't. So often we try to go after the world. Who's your product for? Everybody. No, actually, it's not. And so finding that, Clayton Christensen had the great one of the job. Find the job that your customers are hiring you to solve for them, and then make sure that you communicate that. And so branding today can be big challenge. I think when you and I spoke, I talked about owning a word, finding the idea of owning a word that sets you apart now somebody else can own that word in a whole different industry, right? But in your business, what word can you own? And I was on a call just recently with a young man who read my book, took that away, and I said, let me guess what your word, because he said, I did that. And so I went out on his LinkedIn and I went through and started guessing the word. He actually had picked 3, the words that he had used to build his brand. And there it was. You could find it, not that here's my brand, here's my brand, here's my brand, but here are the things I value, hence the implied reinforcement of that brand. So those are some of the things that we need to do today, is put ourselves out there so that, where are customers going to find us? They're not going to find us necessarily at trade shows or events. They're going to find us online, participating in conversations that are important to them. Use our brand to bring value to that.
Amen. Thank you very much for that.
You're
I appreciate
welcome. It.
So I want to talk a little bit about social media as a whole, and really how you came to focus a bit. I know you kind of do other things as well, but focus a bit on LinkedIn. But as the social media landscape has shifted and changed, what are some of the key factors that we should be considering as we make decisions about the outlets that we play in and how we participate in those outlets?
I saw you made an interesting post on LinkedIn just the other day about what platform is performing best for the audience, right? And that did very well. I think you got 18 comments on that, and a lot of people engaged with it. And I found it interesting. I thought, here people are giving these answers, and yet I'm guessing that post did really well simply by asking that question on LinkedIn. And so what's changed, and I alluded to it before, is that we used to use social media from a mindset of, okay, it's an advertising platform, so let me put my ads out there and drive people to my content. Now, some people said, well, I've never run an ad on social media. Well, you probably have if you've created yourself a professional photo with a professional image and then professional marketing image. And then here's the call to action and here's the link. Yeah, that's an ad. Now, the fact that you wrapped it around an Instagram post or a Facebook post, it's still an ad. And the biggest change has been dialing back the scalability. When I want something automated, I'm just a small business owner and I just want to be able to scale everything. And unfortunately, we're tired of looking at ads. And so more and more our content is being awash. Our feeds are being awash in people's ads that are wrapped like content. And what you need to change, and particularly social media, is to really deliver content. And what that means is, and you heard me say this in one of my presentations, particularly on LinkedIn, you need to start a conversation. And I'll ask people, they say, well, look at this picture. And I'll say, okay, will that picture of 4 diverse people sitting around a laptop, smiling like they're paying attention, generate the interest to create people to start a conversation? And I always hear, well, I need to catch their attention. Well, conversations catch their attention much more than a pretty picture. And now with Canva and so many other tools and TikTok with the editing tools, everybody can create high quality imagery and videos. So now what do? Well, now you got to step back and say, okay, I can't make it look like an ad. I've actually got to start a conversation with my prospects that I'm reaching out to. And that's a very hard decision because so many people are comfortable creating a really pretty picture and putting it out there and hoping people really like the picture rather than worrying about what the content is that's reinforcing that picture.
Well, and I think I fall into that trap myself, right? And I can recognize that as the ways that I've always done social media in the past and the ways that I need to do social media in the future. And specifically how different, I mean, you used to be able to also get by with making one graphic and putting it in lots of places. Yep. And that's not necessarily the case anymore. And what works in one place may not work in another. And yet, you know, we're also seeing the world change with short form content, like videos are totally taking over the world. And yet LinkedIn seems to be sitting in this different place that's abiding by different rules and having different conversations. And I know you are one of the top influencers on LinkedIn. So I'd love for you to share what are some of the strategies that you would recommend for a business owner. And you talk a little bit about business pages versus being an individual and being a human. How would you recommend we show up as humans on LinkedIn?
Well, and you ask a great question. And there is a distinction. LinkedIn's going to make you pay if you're a business entity. They're going to make you pay. And most people don't know that when your business puts out a piece of content on their LinkedIn post, only 3% of their 2 to 3% of your followers will see that content. LinkedIn will not show it to everybody following. And that's always a shock. That wait, they're following me. That means they want my content. Yeah, but LinkedIn's only going to show it to 2 to 3%. But on the flip side, LinkedIn really wants their platform to be about business conversations and connections. So you, a human being, decide to post your content on LinkedIn as an individual, LinkedIn's going to show it to 10% of your connections. Well, that sounds a lot better than the business, but unfortunately, it's a lot less than your 100%. And the key there is, did your post and content start a conversation? And most of the time, and Michelle, this is the part that most people don't like me to say, video and professionally produced imagery do not start conversations on LinkedIn. I call them Insta likes. They cause people to click the like button and move on. And then LinkedIn's like, that's not worth any value to our platform. We're not going to show that to anyone. Mm-hmm. And that's always a shock to the audience who have been creating these beautiful LinkedIn, these beautiful videos. And then they move them over to LinkedIn and it's crickets. There's no engagement. And you've heard me say it now a couple of times. And I've had enough people. The presentation that I did that you sat in on, Salt Lake City, mm-hmm. right? We had randomly picked somebody from the audience who created a post right then. There was no link, there was no pictures, and it was just text. And it wasn't even that much text. And it was Jody who posted it. And then we just had everybody enter into the conversation. And she, after that, when I presented for about just an hour, when I came back to her, she'd already had more than 1,000 people look at that post simply because LinkedIn's algorithm saw that we started a conversation. This is one of the pieces of advice I give to anybody going on stage. You should have a LinkedIn post ready to go that covers the material you're going to talk about. You throw it up on LinkedIn and then invite your audience during your presentation to participate on LinkedIn with commentary, questions. Not that you can respond right then, you'll come back to it. But once the conversation starts in near real time, by the time you get off the stage, 1,000 people will have seen your content without ever even watching you speak. And now you can go back to those people who did participate. And it's a fantastic way of building a rapport and an experience with your audience, rather than just whether you're just public speaking, whether we're having it would have been a great example right here for our call, right? Now that I think about it, we could have done a LinkedIn post, told the audience, hey, here's our LinkedIn post. So there's all kinds of ways that you can now start using the platform. And I tell people, you're going to see a 10x increase in the amount of views, impressions, and exposure for your content if you stop creating and sharing those videos and professionally produced imagery. And then really people don't like to hear that because they've just really have fallen in love with those beautiful videos and imagery that they've created.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm one of those interesting anomalies in the social media world. I've played in it for a long time. And my audience has always been business to business to a certain extent. And yet LinkedIn has never been one of my priorities, which makes zero sense because that's where I probably should be. And you can tell by looking at my LinkedIn activity that I'm sporadic at best in there. Yeah. And part of that is just because of habits and other things. And because personally, I spend more time consuming Facebook and Instagram. So it's easier for me to play in those platforms than it is for me to play in LinkedIn, where I probably should be. And so I know there are other people who have shared that before, like, oh, I really haven't, or an admittance on my part that because I've been doing LinkedIn wrong, quote unquote, for a long time, I went to other places where I got the kind of likes and validation that I wanted from my marketing and other platforms. And so as I've been making the shift over and trying to do a little bit more on LinkedIn, I have been impressed about what's there. And yet I'm still wondering and working through how does that work next? Like I'm a kind of person who understands that if I'm showing up on people's feeds, if people are getting a little bit of view of Michelle McCullough from time to time, that's going to be valuable. And it's going to be really hard for me not to share this episode, but then to want to share a conversation about this episode that then leads to something else, because I'm always looking for what's next. So as you think about playing the long game in LinkedIn, what strategies do you have for marketers and experts as they're using and playing the long game with LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is going to give you an incredible amount of exposure that you didn't even know that you were going to be able to get, because you've been getting, everybody's comfortable with a certain number of reactions on the other social media platforms, and they come to LinkedIn and they're not having any success. And yet when you start to make these changes, you see this huge jump. In addition, 100% of your paying prospects and customers are on LinkedIn. That is not the case on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or TikTok. 100% of the people who have the money to pay you to do what you want to do to help them are on LinkedIn. And this is a mindset we need to change, that I need to go and build a voice in front of the audience who values what I have to say and has the money to pay me to do it. And that's the biggest challenge. Is it's so nice to get all of those likes and love from those other social media platforms, but it's really nice when a paying customer reaches out and takes a look. And so what you need to do on LinkedIn is at least one piece of content a week, because LinkedIn prioritizes whoever you connected with this week, they bubble up to the top. LinkedIn's going to show your content to them guaranteed. Paying attention to hashtags on LinkedIn, but no more than 5. The Instagram hashtag ocean, LinkedIn will shut you down for doing that. So no more than 5, but at least 3. And then getting people to comment. It's all about conversations on LinkedIn. In a recent blog post that LinkedIn just put out last week, I went through, it's about a 400-word blog post, very short, but they mentioned the word conversations 8 times in that blog post. They are doing everything they can to promote conversations, and conversations are made up of comments. So what I tell people is ease back on the content creation and dramatically increase the comment and conversation participation. If you can do 10 comments a day, Michelle, I can guarantee that anybody listening, if they were to leave 10 comments a day for a week, the number of profile views are going to jump by 300 to 500%. The number of connection requests are going to jump from people who are interested in their content. And you're going to be reaching a vast new audience of people who never heard of you simply because you paid attention to their conversations, participated. And these comments need to have at least 5 words and add value to the conversation. And I can guarantee the audience that's listening, if you do that, now that's a lot. That's like 50 in a week. Okay, do 2 a day. I still guarantee it. Finding ways to participate in other people's conversation. We are so geared towards, I got to create content and push it out there. That's an advertising mentality. I'm going to create a message. I'm going to shove it out to my audience and they're going to see it. And no, LinkedIn's like, no, there's plenty of content. Go participate in a conversation. And that's what's going to be the biggest reward for any small business out there.
Well, and what's funny is you talk about, well, you need to do it this many times and this many times. But the reality is what you're telling me about LinkedIn is way less than what the beasts want on Facebook and Instagram. So like if you go from posting once a week on LinkedIn and leaving 10 comments a day, well, people are doing that all the time, easy in the other platforms. And they're like, oh, LinkedIn, that sounds so hard and tricky and almost too good to be true. And yet It is, because as we've tested and played with it a little bit, we've been incredibly impressed. I've been impressed. I shouldn't say we, but I've watched it and I've gone in and said, okay, I'll play in the feed for a little bit and I'll just see what comes up and I will comment on some other people. And I'm watching my profile views increase and people reaching out more. And it is so fascinating. And I've done a halfway job at what you said as I'm getting into the new habits and new routines. So the numbers are there and they're impressive. And yet sometimes we still fall back into old patterns. So today is the charge not to do that anymore.
That's right. We do fall into those old patterns and it's hard. And because it's kind of like an addiction. It's kind of like,
sure,
it's a lot of fun. But LinkedIn's like, okay, you can have fun or you can have money. Which one would you like to do?
Money, for sure.
Money. That's what we're in this
for. Well, sadly, I feel like you and I could chat for a long time. We've hardly gone deep in lots of subjects and we could. But before we wrap up, I'd love for you to share, is there any last bit of advice or something that we didn't cover that you feel passionate about that you'd love to share with our audience?
Yeah, there is one way for you to win at Monopoly that you are overlooking and you can beat your kids every time.
I'm ready.
Okay? Monopoly is a game of monopolies, but we think about it as property. No, there is a limited resource in the game of Monopoly that most people are unfamiliar with. So here's what you should do. You should buy the orange. That's the St. James, Tennessee, New York Avenue, right? You should buy those. Get that Monopoly. That's the number one priority. Your second priority is get the light blues, Oriental Avenue, Connecticut, I think, on the first row. Now, max those out with houses. Do not upgrade to hotels. Why?
Okay.
Because there's only 32 houses in the game. And if you put 12 houses on the Browns and 12 houses on the lights, you have now taken up 24 of the 32 houses available. As soon as you put a hotel on there, boom, you've given houses to your opponents to take money from you. So the scarce resource and monopoly in the game is not the properties, it is the houses. And the reason you get those two properties is because of probability. Going to jail or landing on jail is the number one space in the game. You know, go to jail sends you there. There's lots of chance cards, rolling doubles 3 times. That means when you're in jail, a 6, 7, or 8, the 3 highest combos are going to put you right on those orange properties. Now, the 7 is going to put you on community chest, but the other 2 are going to put you on St. James or Tennessee. And that's going to have 4 houses on it. Bam, you're going to nail your opponent. And and the same thing with the light blues, people going to go, right? So those 2 properties maxed out with houses, give up Boardwalk, give up Marvin Gardens, give up all of the rest of that, go for that, and then max out those houses and never buy a hotel. There you go. That's the one piece of advice, business advice, I'm going to pass on to your audience on how to beat their kids at Monopoly on a consistent basis.
Well, I'll tell you, Richard, you will become my kids' very favorite Make It Happen episode because now you have made me want to play Monopoly.
Well, I have to admit, Monopoly, we don't have a copy in our house. And there's a reason, because we do board games at my house. And I'll just change my virtual background for those who are watching. They can see a small amount of my board game collection here behind me. This is a small amount, right? We play a lot of Ticket to Ride, a lot of, Catan, Cecil Catan, Sequence, Dominion. You can see many of those behind me. And this is a part of my small collection. So Monopoly is not played at my house, but if you want to win, that's the secret.
I love it. Thank you so much. Now, before we close this up, I'd love for you to share, where can people find out more about you and what do you have coming up?
They can find me at blisspointconsult.com, blisspointconsult.com. But mostly on LinkedIn, Richard Bliss. I'm Richard Bliss on Facebook, Richard Bliss on Twitter, Richard Bliss on, I think, Instagram, Richard Bliss on LinkedIn. No, I'm not Richard Bliss on LinkedIn. I'm Bliss, linkedin.com/in/Bliss. And you'll see a book come out from me this summer, working with Tom Singer with that. We're looking at LinkedIn for speakers, how to book your next engagement using the LinkedIn platform. And so that's probably coming out. I'll be doing some public speaking. I'll be in St. Louis in a couple of weeks, Columbus. And then I'm off to Barcelona for vacation. So nobody will see me for a while. So
awesome.
But that's how you can find me, my website. And then if they'd like to download the research report that we base all of our training on, they can find that at blisspointconsult.com. Right there in the beginning, they can put in their name and they'll get a free copy of the annual LinkedIn algorithm research report that we sponsor every year, put on by Richard Vanderblom is the author of that. So that's another way they can get some information.
Awesome. And I'll make sure those links are in the show notes so they are easily to access and you can get all those details. Richard, thank you so much for being on Make It Happen. I'm really, really grateful that you came on the show today.
Michelle, it's been great. Thanks for having me.
And now it's time for a few of my favorite things. This is called the Time Timer. I could not come up with a better name, but Time Timer it is. This I use for all podcast episodes. It just has a little countdown. I can see it getting closer. It's big so that I can see it as it's going down. Believe it or not, I'm not wearing contacts or glasses right now, and I should be. But this I can see from 10 feet away, which I love. They actually have a smaller version that I have as well that I use for other projects. And but it's also really good for mastermind events and mastermind groups where I can set on the table, hey, you've got 20 minutes. They can see that it's running down. I can see that it's running down. You can turn the alarm on or off. I never really use the alarm so that that's not a sound effect that comes in, especially if I'm just going a little bit over. But Time Timer, I got this on Amazon. You can also find them on other places like Office Max, Office Depot, or order it through your favorite office supply store around you. But Time Timer, we'll have the link below for that. This is my favorite baby product. Now, I currently do not have babies, but I still give this away. In fact, I just bought 12 new boxes for baby gifts. This is the Medela Quick Clean Micro Steam Bags. It's made for breast pump parts. I don't know if I've ever said that word on Make It Happen before, but you're welcome. But what I use this for, yes, you can use it for pump parts if you want, but I put pacifiers and kid teethers and all kinds of other things in this bag. You put a little bit of water in it, you put it in the microwave, and it sanitizes everything. And so we use these all the time. I still use them from time to time. Obviously, I don't have the same need anymore. My kids are a lot more grown up than that, but you can use each bag 20 times. And so when you buy a little bag like this, you've got 100 uses in it, and it's really helpful. So I will put this in the link below. If you don't have kids, this makes a great baby gift. Just tell the parents that you're giving them to about it and they will love it. Today's book recommendation is going to be for an interesting group. Some of you I know are patriotic lads and lasses like me. I just finished all 19 hours of the Abigail Adams Audible biography. Truthfully, I started this about 2 years ago. It took me 2 years to listen to the first 5 hours, and it took me 10 days to listen to the last 14. I really enjoyed it. If you like historical biographies, if you like the founding fathers and kind of the dawn of America, you'll enjoy this. But I also really liked her take, especially in her role as being a woman in the United States. I love men too, so it's not like I'm like anti-men or anything, but it was really interesting to listen to her talk about and advocate for women's rights long before that was even a thing. And so I really loved that biography. So if you're looking for something a little bit different, some people are like, Michelle, you give boring book recommendations. Do you read anything for fun? And to that, I would say my favorite author is Harlan Coben in mysteries, believe it or not. I love a good John Grisham as well. But if you're looking for a mystery novel, a kind of whodunit, I recommend Harlan Coben. Start in his earlier stuff. Like Tell No One is one of my favorites that you can go watch. The later he gets, the more he adds the swears. And if you know me, you know I'm not a big fan of that. So some of his old ones over the last decade are great. So if you don't like any of these book recommendations, you should send me books to read, okay? Because this is what I've got. And those are a few of my favorite things. I hope you loved today's conversation with Richard Bliss and you took away a takeaway or two that you can use right now in your business. I would love for you to share them in the comments below. What tips, strategies, and ideas, even if they just came to you while we were having the conversation, are you looking forward to implementing in your business? Because the landscape has changed, marketing is different, social media is different, so we have to start using some different approaches to get the results that we want. If you liked today's episode, I would love for you to make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes that are coming your way. And I would love for you to leave an honest rating or review so that others can find this podcast, especially if you're like an entrepreneur, a small business owner, and you are looking for podcasts, you know what that feels like to find one that works for you. So we would love your help in that department. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's Make It Happen episode. I love that we're getting into summer, but whether you're watching this now or 6 months from now, we are thrilled to have you here. Thank you for being part of Make It Happen.